Hi, it's your girl Jojo. I'm back once again. If you are new here, kindly subscribe to my channel and please do like my videos and turn on the notification bell so that each time I post, you'll be notified. These are the materials we are going to be using to bleach and plug the knots. The tools and materials have been outlined, and with the materials, you can use any brand of your choice. This is the bleach powder. This is the developer. And we have the tint bowl and brush. You can use a plastic knife or a spatula. This is a tweezer. And you have a spray bottle. So this is a 6x6 closure I purchased from a local beauty supply shop. And it's 12 inches. This is a Mongolian curl closure. There is a thin net around the closure, but after you are done fixing your wig or making your wig, you can use the net to package it nicely. It helps the hair stay in place and it packages it neatly, so that's up to you if you'd still want to use the net. Okay, so guys, you can either use a flat surface for this process, or you can either do it on your mannequin or your blockhead. So here I'm going to use the tweezer and then the spray bottle filled with water, and I'm going to spray the closure. I'm going to wet the closure to make the roots or the knot soft. The reason why we wet the closure or the frontal before plucking it is to make the roots or the knots very soft, to enable us pluck or remove the unwanted hairs. So at any point in time when the closure gets dry, you'd have to wet it again and continue the procedure. So the reason why we pluck the frontals or the closures is to make the closure look very natural when you wear it. So for instance, you wouldn't want the net to be too obvious on your scalp, or you wouldn't want it to be too obvious. So when you pluck and you bleach it, it's going to make it look more natural when it sits on your head. I hope I'm painting the picture right. So that's the reason why we make the front, because looking at our hairlines, we don't usually have very full hairlines. So that's the reason why we plug the closures, the fronts of the closures or the frontals, to lighten it up a bit, to make it look like your scalp and then your hair. So this is the process. So we are going to be using the tweezer here after we wet it. So when we are done plucking the frontal or the closure to the desired volume that would like the edges to be, or would like the edges to look like, would then bleach the knots or the roots of the hair. So as I keep going, I keep applying water to it. So with the tweezers, you'd have to hold the tweezer with your thumb and your index finger, and then you're going to clamp it onto the hair and then drag it backwards. So as it's open, you position it where you want to pluck out the hair or the hair you'd like to remove. If you don't intend removing some hair at a particular part, then you wouldn't have to grab it with a tweezer, because when you grab and you close it and you drag it backwards, it's going to come off. And with curly hairs, it's very, very soft when it comes to the frontal or the closure. So you have to be very careful when plucking it or tweezing. It's different from straight hair, because when it comes to the straight hair, it's not as soft as the curly hairs, and I think that's how it's been manufactured from the manufacturers. That's how it was made. So naturally, if you'd pay attention, you'd notice that usually curly hairs are very soft when plucking as compared to straight hair. So I'm repeating the same procedure from the beginning to the end. And as you can see from where I started from, it looks a lot different from the other side. You can tell a lot of the hairs have been plucked out. So this is the same thing you apply. This is the same procedure applied till the end. And you can comb through to remove the excess hair or the loose hair from the closure so that you know where else to pluck. So I keep applying water as I go because the hair dries up eventually, so you have to keep applying water to keep it wet. You have to be very gentle with this process because you can easily pluck hair out of a place you don't need the hair to come off. In the process of plucking, you'd see that a lot of the hair would come off. You'd have a lot of hair out of the closure. You don't need to fret as long as the closure still looks the way you want it to look. That should be fine. So I keep holding the hair with the tweezer and I keep dragging it backwards. I drag it on the net. I don't drag it in the air because if I'm to drag it off the net or off the base of the hair, I'm going to actually pluck it out and I'm going to have a deep depression or I'm going to have a big hole in the closure. But as I'm dragging it, I make sure I drag it on the net. So I hold the hair with a tweezer and I drag it on the surface or the roots of the closure. As I explained earlier, if you are to grab the hair with a tweezer and you pull it off, or it's like you are picking it off the net, you're going to have a chunk of the hair come off the closure. But since you wouldn't want that, you have to concentrate and make sure that as you drag the hair, you drag it on the net. It has to touch the surface. This is a simple method, and I wouldn't say it's easy. But as you keep practicing, you get it right. You might not get it right on your first try, but as time goes on and you keep practicing, you definitely get it right. And you definitely get it to your desired taste. So as you can see a difference between the first part that I plugged and the part that I haven't plugged. So this is the same procedure I'm going to repeat throughout. So if you want the whole closure to be light, it's the same procedure that you use. I have plugged a lot of the edges, so I'm going a bit inward to also make that place look a little lighter than the front. But certainly the front will be lighter, way lighter than the mid part of the closure. Whoa, just have a look at the amount of hair that came from just the front or the edges of the closure. But even with this amount of hair coming off the front of the closure, the edges don't even look very light. So I'm going to keep tweezing until I get or I see what I want to see in my closure. How I would like my edges to look. So I'm going to do that, and I keep combing it out to remove the excess hair. So at this point, after tweezing the hair, you'd see there are some isolated knots at the edges of the closure. So you'd have to use your tweezer to pick those knots. They usually look very tough and stubborn. And if left at the edges of the closure, it wouldn't make it look natural. So there's the need to actually take those off. They are usually very thick and they are very obvious at the edges of the net. So they'll definitely have to go off. So guys, you can tell that there's some progress. So I'm combing out the hair and I'm removing the excess hair that I've plucked out. And don't worry, you can comb it out even if it's curly hair because it's not going to destroy the curl. You'd only have to comb it when the hair is wet. If it's dry and you try combing it, you are going to spoil the curl pattern. And also, the reason why it's not advisable to tweeze while the hair is dry is because you'd end up tearing the hair. And you're going to have the roots very visible. And you're going to have really spiky hairs in the closure. So that's the reason why we wet the closure or the frontals before plucking. So you definitely have to wet the hair before you comb it out. I'm combing it out because I want to remove the loose hair or the hair that I plucked out. So this is the amount of hair that I have coming off the closure after I was done tweezing. So guys, this is what it looks like right now. Just what it looks like. So you can tell that the front of the closure is lighter than the other parts of the closure. As I place it on my skin, it looks a lot natural, but you can still see the stubborn knots. So you'd have to go on to take off those knots to make it look very natural. But you'd also have to be careful in order not to tear the net of the closure. So you'd have to aim at the knots and then pull that out. But you don't have to grab the net, because if you grab the net and the net is soft and then you pull it, you're going to rip the net, or you're going to have holes in the net of the closure. And I bet you wouldn't like that. So you have to be very, very cautious. At this point, I part the closure. I take off the very first parts or a little bit of the hair at the edges, and then I tweeze once again to make the other sides lighter, because I wouldn't want the you wouldn't want the situation whereby just the edges are very light and then from the edges backwards it's very full. It wouldn't look too natural. So that's why I'm doing this as well, to make it a bit lighter than the front. So you can keep tweezing inward if you'd like the frontal to be very light. That's up to you. And if you also want to create a pattern, you can do that by also tweezing. So you'd have to just know where you'd like to be lighter and then tweeze. So for example, if it's a line that I want to create, I would have to tweeze it to look very natural and to make it look like a line or a pattern. As you can see, there are various patterns in the 6x6 closure. So you can decide to make a wider pattern if you'd like. So at this point, I'm going to bleach the knots to make it look more natural. Without bleaching the knots are going to look dark and it wouldn't look like your scalp. But when you bleach the knots, it gives it a very nice tone that will match your skin color or the color of your scalp. So that's the reason why we bleach it. So this is my tint bowl and my brush, and I'm going to be mixing the bleach. I'm going to make a paste that would bleach the knots of the closure. So this is the bleaching powder I used. So you can use any of your choice, whichever one you'd prefer. And this is my developer. So you'd have to mix both to be able to get the knots to bleach or any kind of hair to bleach. So I'm going to be mixing it and making a paste out of it. I'm going to put a bit of the powder and a bit of the developer. You wouldn't want to mix so much because it might end up going to waste. So you'd have to mix a little. If it's not enough, then you can mix some again and apply it. So at this point, you can use your plastic knife or a spatula to mix the stuff to get a paste. And you would not want your paste to be too runny or too light, because it's going to penetrate the net and touch the hair. And when that happens, you are going to have it looking very, very funny. So I bet you wouldn't want that. So you'd have to make the paste thick enough to be able to spread across the net or spread over the net. The paste shouldn't be too thick and it shouldn't be too light. It should just be okay enough to be able to spread on the nets of the closure, because you'd want to apply just the paste to the knots and not any part of the hair. If the paste is able to penetrate and it touches the other part of the hair, it will make the roots or the scalp look very unnatural. So you'd want to avoid that, and you'd have to lay your closure very flat on the surface and have all the hairs together before applying. And I'm using a plastic knife or a spatula to spread this to prevent penetration. That's why I did not use the brush. So you can use the spatula or the knife, the plastic knife, to spread the paste onto the closure. So I'm going to make sure the paste touches every part of the closure in order to cover every single root or knot on the closure. You wouldn't want a part to be dyed and another part to be left as it was. So the paste is a little bit too thick, so I'm adding a bit of the developer to it to make it a bit lighter to enable me to spread it better. But mind you, you'd have to mix the paste really well to make sure it makes a good mixture before applying it to the net. Gently spread the paste onto the net or the knots. While applying the paste, be careful not to press onto the closure, because if you press the knife or the spatula onto the closure, it's going to still penetrate. The paste is going to penetrate to the other side and touch some hairs. So you'd have to be very gentle when spreading the paste onto the net. And you have to make sure it doesn't touch any part of the hairs. If not, you are going to have a different look. When you are through applying the paste, you can put it on an aluminium foil, or you can use a plastic to cover it, and that's going to produce heat. When bleaching, when you cover it with an aluminium foil or a plastic bag, it's going to speed up the process of bleaching. But here's the case, I have to improvise because I don't have an aluminium foil at the moment. So I'm going to place a plastic bag on the closure, on the part that I have applied the paste to or the bleach to. And I'm going to let it settle for some time. And I would keep checking until I have it bleached to the level that I would like it to be. So you'd have to keep checking from time to time. And mind you, it bleaches faster when there's an aluminium foil or a plastic covering it. So guys, as you can see, you can tell that the roots are looking brownish and it's almost like my skin color. But when all is said and done, I'm going to be using a tint spray that will best suit my skin tone and look more like my scalp. So guys, if you find this tutorial helpful, kindly like this video and please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't, and please share and please turn on your notification bell so that each time I post you'll be notified. Thank you. And this is your girl Jojo from Accra, Ghana. You can hit me up on Instagram or send me any message and I'll be so glad to assist you.